Hello out there, we're on the air, it's hockey night tonight.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Lighting Lamp Podcast. I'm here with Tim.
Hello.
And Steve.
Hello.
And I just want to apologize. We did actually end up recording an episode on Friday that got eaten by OBS or Discord. I'm not sure which one. So
Corona.
Or possibly coronavirus. So that's why this content's a little late. We're going to go back to the topic that we talked about last time, but I'll keep it a secret for some special hype. I don't know. Whatever. We did record an episode. It got eaten, so now we're here. This episode's going to be, we're talking international rosters. We're saying, obviously the Olympics this year got pushed back a year due to current circumstances, but we decided to have some fun and build some international rosters based on current day players. So we ended up picking 6 teams. We have Team Russia, Team Canada, Team United States, Team Sweden, Team Finland. And then instead of doing one of the smaller-ish programs like Team Czech or Team, Denmark or Team Germany or something, we decided to make like a Team North America type situation, except it's just Team World 21 and under. So any player 21 or under from around the world would end up on this team. So we're just going to go back and forth. We're going to talk rosters, and we're going to just talk about, who we think would have the best shot to win this tournament. So I guess we should probably just start off with the 2 big ones, Canada and Team USA. So we'll start off with Team Canada. This was Steve's roster to build. So Steve, talk us through our roster. Talk us through your mindset, guys that you left out, stuff like that. So just let's go through the roster first.
Right. So the roster I came up with at the end of the day was for forwards I have Sidney Crosby, Connor McDavid, Nathan MacKinnon, John Tavares, Patrice Bergeron, Jonathan Toews, Tyler Seguin, Mitch Marner, Brad Marchand, Jonathan Huberdeau, Giroux, Stamkos, Point. And then on defense, I have Doughty, Subban, Riley, Letang, Brett Burns, Alex Pietrangelo. And then I have Carey Price, Braden Holtby, and Jordan Binnington in net. So I found this to be a lot harder than I thought it would be. And not because it's hard to find good Canadian players. It's just that there's a lot of them, and a lot of guys I felt like that should have been here and could have been here, but it was like splitting hairs almost. I had to cut guys like Taylor Hall, Jamie Benn, Sean Couturier didn't make the cut for me. Dougie Hamilton got cut. There were a lot of guys here that I feel like could have made it. Matt Duchene, and just it just came down to a matter of personal opinion, I guess.
Yeah, because there's a couple of guys that I noticed that were off the roster. Obviously, Team Canada is a super competitive roster to even try to make. There's no way that you're ever going to get every player you want, right? It's impossible. I noticed that, obviously, like you said, Jamie Benn was not on the roster. What about Mark Scheifele? He's somebody that I would have thought would be on the radar.
I ended up getting hung up on either Braden Point or Mark Scheifele, and I really wanted to take Mark Scheifele. And if Hockey Canada were to pick Braden Point over Mark Scheifele, I'd be very surprised. But I just felt with the way Braden Point already plays with Steven Stamkos, added to the level that he himself is already a 40-goal scorer, I thought that kind of maybe raised the bar on him a little bit more.
What about Jamie
Yeah, I
Benn?
thought. Yeah, that's really the big one.
Well, I was carrying so many centers already, right? And I know Jamie Benn's not a center, so it meant I was shifting guys to wings. And he was the last one. He was the last forward I cut. And it really came down to, could I justify bringing Jamie Benn over Steven Stamkos, Braden Point, or a guy like Tyler Sagan, Jonathan Taves, or Patrice Bergeron. And it was, I don't really think I could. And I think my team construction, I ended up erring more towards a little bit of more speed than size. And I think that kind of contributed to decision two to cut Jamie Benn because he's not exactly the fastest guy on the ice.
So who, if you're starting round robin game one, who's starting in net? Price, Binnington, or Braden Holtby?
I think Carey Price. I think, I mean, he's still in my mind a top 3 goaltender in the NHL. So I don't see how he doesn't at least get the chance to like have the net, and it essentially would be the other goaltender's job to try to take it from him. I don't think you'd start, especially with how accomplished Carey Price is in relation to the other two, outside of Braden Holtby's Stanley Cup. But yeah, that was kind of my thinking on that.
I do want to pick your brain about 2 more guys. Obviously, with Team Canada, there's just a lot of guys you can kind of pick on and say, you know, how come they aren't here, obviously. But Matt Murray in net, maybe over a guy like Braden Holtby, who's struggled this year, or you're not feeling Matt Murray for this roster?
I see. The thing with Matt Murray is, see, and it's hard to just say I can't say Matt Murray because he struggled this year, and I picked Braden Holtby, and the Stanley Cup champion doesn't really matter because Matt Murray's got 2, right? So I think more than anything, I just like Braden Holtby's game better than Matt Murray. So I think it might have came down more to preference. I also like Braden Holtby's track record in big games. When it mattered, he usually always showed up. So I thought that was another consideration for that.
The only other guy that I was thinking was Shea Weber. I know he's been banged up this year, but
Shea Weber was one of the last guys I cut, and I ended up. So I forgot Thomas Chabot is only 20, and I originally included him as my 7th defenseman. So with that revision, I would probably remove Thomas Chabot and put Shea Weber in the 7 hole. Not saying
Chabot's 23.
Oh, is he 23?
Yeah, he's a lot older than I thought he was.
Yeah, I thought he was 20, so I didn't have him. Okay, so then I have Thomas Chabot, and that's really what it came down to. Then it was for me, it was a decision between Thomas Chabot and Shea Weber, and like I said, I was erring on the side of some speed and some skill, and I thought Thomas Chabot fit that mold obviously a little better. He's a little more mobile than Shea Weber is, especially after Shea Weber's a couple of lower body injuries. Not exactly the most, fastest guy on the rink anymore.
Now, Steve, I got 2 questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna ask you 1,000 players, but I want to know why you didn't take Riley Smith.
Riley Smith?
Yeah.
They're just better guys, honestly. I mean, he's been good for Vegas, but I mean, I don't think he cracks that level of like the Canadian.
He's been doing it for a few
national
seasons
team.
now, putting up 50-point seasons.
Yeah, but like he'd be taking the place of a guy like Jonathan Taves or.
I think Giroux is an interesting one, to be quite honest.
Claude Giroux's just kind of.
He's a house name. I get it.
He's
how do you
so
leave him
good
off?
though. And I can't put Riley Smith on that roster over Claude Giroux.
I see your point, but I was just curious. You said you had an issue with finding, and then my other question is, how'd you leave off Dougie Hamilton?
Dougie Hamilton was a hard one to cut too, but in terms of overall performance, I mean, I cut Duncan Keith. I had Mark Giordano, Ryan Ellis all on this list too that I had to cut. I wanted Dougie Hamilton, but I also wanted to bring Brett Burns, and I felt
Subban too.
Yeah, I did bring Subban, but I think Subban's track record is better than what this one season's been. And
I agree with that.
I felt like if I was bringing Dougie Hamilton and Brett Burns, they're both kind of the same player. They're both pretty high risk, high reward. And I just feel like Brett Burns is a little bit more high reward considering how high his offensive output can be compared to Dougie Hamilton's. So I kind of just felt like he'd be a better player to have for power plays and things like that.
All right.
Okay, one last player. Specifically given his recent track record, how was it hard to cut Ryan O'Reilly off this roster?
Yeah. I mean, he's a not a Hart Trophy. He's a Conn Smythe Trophy winner, right? But I don't think he brings a level of like high end skill. You know what I mean? That some of these other guys do. I mean, he's a good player. Don't get me wrong.
I
I
mean,
have
that
nothing.
scrappy little shit that he does in front of the net.
Yeah, exactly. The rest of these guys, the guys I went with, are kind of just like, for lack of a better way to put it, the best. Right? They're just really good at what they do. And not to say Ryan O'Reilly isn't. These guys are just kind of more talent level, where like Ryan O'Reilly's got a talent level, but he's also just like a hard worker. He's like the ultimate grinder, honestly.
Now, I did, because we saw Team USA go with a little bit more of like a blue collar checking type team the last time there was an international tournament, and it just didn't work at all.
They built their roster, quote unquote, to beat Canada, and Canada just skated all over them.
Did that impact your decision on building a more fleet of foot, offensive geared team, or were you just going to do that just based on the amount of pure skill that's available in Team Canada?
Well, I think that's kind of what it is, right? When you look at, like, you have to play to your talent base, right? And, like, if this was, like, a smaller team, right, like the Czechs, it might be a little more hard-working than the Canadians, because the program's not as big and not as developed. But, like, Canada can play the most up-tempo skating game in the world, right? When you have guys like McKinnon and McDavid and Sidney Crosby. So the idea was kind of always to build just like a team that could outscore people. But yeah, that's kind of where I kind of had that vision already for the Canadians, and then it was just so easy to do it based on who was available.
Okay, so I guess the last thing on the thing is just, your captains and your alternates, and then kind of just a brief go in as to why you picked these guys.
Right. So Sid is obviously my captain, right? And there's really not a question, right? He scored the golden goal. It's Sid the Kid. Like, this is, his team. Jonathan Toews is my other alternate, and that kind of just goes with the pedigree of being Jonathan Toews, 3-time Stanley Cup champion, 2-time gold medalist. Like, he's got the pedigree to be an alternate captain, and he's just the ultimate captain. And because Sid's on the team, he can't be captain, so he's got to be at least a letter wearer, And then Drew Doughty, again, pedigree, 2-time Stanley Cup champion, 2-time gold medalist. Like, the guy's just nasty. So, and he's also a good character guy to have in the locker room. I mean, he's got some fire, some personality, so I figured he'd be a good alternate to have.
Okay, so there is Team Canada. I mean, I honestly don't know that I would have ended up with much of a different team. I might have put somebody in over Point, but I mean, you can't really argue a lot with Team Canada. I mean, it's just this in and of itself is an all-star team, So.
Oh yeah.
So we'll move on to the team that has been trying to beat Team Canada for the better part of our entire lifetime at this point. We'll go on to Team USA, which was Tim's roster to build. So, Tim, walk us through Team USA.
All right, so I figured, as we said earlier, USA's problem last time was they tried to play a big check-in game. So I tried to take a mix of speed and size that was fast. Like some good power forwards. Guys who really are who are sizable is the thing. Because Canada's issues are just going to... Drew Doughty's just huge. He's going to run over everyone. Like, what are you going to do? So, my first line was Jack Eichel at left wing, Pavelski at center, and Showtime as right wing. And then I had McDonough and Jones as the defensemen. My second line, Pacioretty at wing, Matthews at center, and the Brinkat at right wing. There's that mix of size and speed that I was talking about. And I've got McAvoy and Carlson at defense. The third line was Goudreau, Oshie, and Wheeler. And fucking Jeff Petrie and Slavin as defense. And my fourth line was Gensel, Brock Nelson, and Chris Kreider. Again, that mix of size and speed. And then my in the Olympic rosters, they put 8 defense. So I put 8 defense. I have Zach Werenski and Tony DeAngelo as my other 2 defensemen, who would obviously just be cut at camp, or someone else would cut at camp if they weren't playing to the performance level. And at goalies, I have Jonathan Quick, Connor Helbiuk, and Ben Bishop. And my extra forwards are Vinny Trocheck and Kevin Hayes.
You did bring Kevin Hayes, huh?
I had to. He's a goober, but he's so good.
I was literally talking about that earlier today. I'm like, I wonder if Tim's gonna bring Kevin Hayes.
Bro, honestly, like, he's literally garbage. Little garbage shithead goal scorer, but he does it.
It's fair, and he's an extra. It's not like he's playing really. He might get a round robin game.
That's the thing. Like, if he played to his performance past capabilities, he could really pop off in this. Like, this is a stage where I think he could do it. There's a lot of space for him to roll out those corners.
It's fair. I just don't think he wins a starting job over some of these other guys.
I agree completely, but that's why it would come down to who was playing better.
Yeah, that's true.
Same thing with Trocheck. Trocheck is just a solid player, but I don't see him cracking.
So
Unless he knocks out like Brock Nelson.
my number one question, before I even ask you who's starting in net, Petrie over Werenski. Talk me through that.
So I wanted a defenseman with a little bit more experience than Zach Werenski. Petrie's older, he's been around the league, and he plays still like 24 minutes a night. He's solid. His plus minus is solid. They need someone in that end, because USA's issue is that all those defensemen are goal scoring defensemen. We don't like. You need a homebody somewhere on the team.
Well, I feel like you can get that in either one of Ryan McDonough or Jacob Slavin, who are both more defensively minded than. Because Jacob Slavin, like, let's be honest here, if he ever wins a Norris Trophy, which he very well could, it's not going to be because he puts up crazy numbers. He's one of the best defensive defensemen in the game.
I agree, but I think that McDonough shines with his ability to take it up.
I mean,
I think his ability to
might
really
even
hit
get
on those boards.
You might get a decent shutdown job out of John Carlson too. I mean, he's been a number 1 matchup guy for a couple of seasons now, and he hasn't really buckled under the pressure. He's still putting up good numbers. This year, he was on pace to break 100 points at one point.
Yeah, and that's what I have with McAvoy.
I just think with how good Zach Werenski is, I wouldn't take Jeff Petrie into my lineup over him. And it's not like the end of the world, right? Because Jeff Petrie's also a good defenseman. Like, it's not like he's here. He's not some plug that's here. He's like actually like a good defenseman. So it's not like it'd be catastrophic to play him. I just think Zach Werenski could add something dynamic. I also gotta ask, no Phil Kessel?
Phil,
No.
the thrill.
I left Hot Dog Man out. I told you I wanted to mix speed and size, and he doesn't crack that.
But Phil Kessel is one of the fastest skaters in the league.
But ice time. It's a bigger rink. I need him out there longer. I need him to be able to play more than 30 seconds a shift.
That's fair.
What about Derek Stepan?
Derek Stepan's great at center, but I just like those guys better, honestly. Like, Brock Nelson's his face-off percentage is this season is disgusting. He's at like 55%.
Yeah, that's a very interesting fourth line you've built. You have a Ranger, an Islander, and a Penguin playing together. You've got the very interesting fourth line going on there. But so Steve went with.
I also, to be honest, considered cutting Johnny Gaudreau. Johnny Gaudreau almost didn't crack the roster.
Now, is that because of his performance this year, or because of a difference in
Performance this
idea of the
year
team?
and size. What I think that DeBrincat does what he does better, and he's around the same size. Johnny Hockey's tiny, and you need someone a little bigger. Honestly, the USA is small wings. It's hard. It's hard to like really, because those boards are going to be really important, honestly, for this team.
So, okay, so game 1, round robin, who's your starting goaltender?
You'd probably have to start Jonathan Quick.
You think so? I would have honestly.
Or Ben,
I'd go with
like
Ben Bishop.
Ben Bishop, yeah. You probably
Wow.
actually.
We all have different opinions. I would go with Connor Hellebuck just because he's having a Vezina type season right now.
Yeah, but so is Ben Bishop.
That's true. This is very true.
And Ben Bishop did it last year, and honestly should have won the Vezina Trophy last year.
That's a camp decision, honestly. And to be honest, the fourth defenseman with Jeff Petrie, like you guys said, how it was questionable. That's a camp decision. If Zach Werenski's outperforming him, or even Charlie McAvoy, who, not that he's by any means not great, he's phenomenal, but if like for some reason he wasn't performing at the proper level, he would also get benched.
So, do you think it's fair to say that the big strength of Team USA is clearly in the back end? Because I mean, all 7 of these defensemen are pretty top defensemen in the National Hockey League. Would it be fair to say that USA's defense and goaltending would be its primary strengths in this tournament?
I don't know. I think that's hard. It's really hard to say because I think USA in recent years with all these kids coming up have really jumped up in offensive firepower.
I mean, we're kind of underestimating the USA's strength down the middle here. I mean, when you can
The centers, yes.
When you can throw a center out there, and at any point it's Jack Eichel, Austin Matthews, Brock Nelson, even DeBrincat, even Wheeler plays a little bit of center. Like, you can throw any of those guys on the rink.
Oh, so it's like that, huh?
Okay, that was definitely really super unnecessary. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think strength down the middle is definitely going to be a primary strength of the team. I feel like a lot of this team is also still pretty blue collar. You know, like you said, your fourth line being Nelson Kreider and Jake Gensel. I mean, granted, Jake Gensel's on pace for point per game and 40 goals this year, but it's still not the same level as like a Canadian fourth line of like Giroux, Stamkos, Point.
I'm not sure I agree with that. If you look at their numbers this season, Giroux, Stamkos, and I don't know about Point, but Giroux and Stamkos, their numbers aren't really that phenomenal this season. They're getting older. I don't know if they're going to be performing at the same level as these kids. I really think that's the big difference maker is because you also have to realize they're not playing, it's international rink size, which completely changes the game. And you have guys like Jake Gensel and Kreider who were performing at that level when they were younger, and Brock Nelson in the IIHF tournaments.
I mean, a lot of these Canadians have too. I think the issue is with building a blue collar team to play on international ice is that it makes the idea of the game a lot harder because there's more space to evade a forecheck, which makes kind of that point of being a big heavy team kind of null and void because if they can't catch you, then they can't get the puck off you. So I think that was the USA's shortcoming in 2014 when they did this, and they built the roster that was quote unquote built to beat Canada. But I don't know.
Oh, I do have one more question. Sorry, I'll let you finish, Steve, but I do have another question after that.
Oh, go ahead. You can go. Sorry.
No Zach Parise.
That was a tough
Interesting.
one. I think, like I said, Zach Parise's 35 years old and he's still good. His power play goals, I think he's actually second in power play goals in the league. He's excellent, but I felt that the experience that Pacioretty, Petrie, Pavelski, and McDonough were bringing was going to be enough that you didn't need him.
I think that's fair. I think Zach Parise. It's hard to say because he gets unfairly judged a lot because of the contract that he signed. But at the same time,
I love Zach Parise. He's one of my favorite players in a USA history. But the issue is that he's just not the same player that he was when he played in the last Olympics.
Is it fair to say that that's also the reason you left Ryan Suter off the roster?
It is why I left him off the roster as well.
Yeah, I mean,
I also left JVR off the roster, which was really tough to do.
Yeah, James Van Riemsdyk. Yeah.
JVR just didn't crack it. I didn't know what to do with him.
Yeah, it's fair. I mean, it's a good thing to see. It's a good problem to have, though. It's good to see that the United States is starting to develop players to the point where you're like, I have too many players now. It's always a good thing.
I also tried to keep the players at their position for the most part. Like, Showtime went to right wing only because he played right wing with Hossa.
See, that was tough for me to do with Canada because I had so many centers I had to bring, So I kind of had to break that rule.
I had that issue with Sweden, but I tried to mix it up where if the player was getting moved, they played there at some point.
Yeah, that's true. So,
because Kyle Connor was also really tough to take off this list.
I love Kyle Connor. He's so good.
I
He's
agree,
a treat
but
to watch.
Like I said, it's just I wanted a mix of size and speed, and that's why Chris Kreider cracked the roster, honestly, and his late season performance.
I mean, I really don't know that anyone's going to argue it at this point. Specifically, like we said, if the tournament started today, it would be basically impossible to leave him off, given how good he's been playing lately.
And Jake Gensel also he's been there, he's done that, he's been in the playoffs, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, like I said, he was on pace for 40 goals before he I think it was his collarbone or his shoulder. He crashed into the net, but so captains and alternates, who do you got and why?
I got Pavelski as my captain because I think that his experience and just overall skill is going to be there. You have such great talent on this team between Kane, Eichel, and Matthews. And, like, you have so many different people who are assistant captains and like Carlson and McDonough and Jones. So it's hard. I wanted someone that everyone was going to be able to look at and say, that's the captain. Like, without question. It's almost like Sid for Canada. He's just the captain. There's not much of a question about it. And then assistant captains, I went Ryan McDonough because I like a defensive assistant captain. And I like Ryan McDonough. I think that he was a decent captain for the Rangers. And he's doing a decent job now still. And Pacioretty, an excellent veteran player.
Max Pacioretty. So Team USA is going into this tournament without Phil Kessel, without Zach Parise, without Ryan Suter. A very young but very exciting roster for sure. So I guess we'll jump over to the youngest roster in the tournament, just by virtue of the rules, which was my Team World 21 and under roster. So we will open this up here. So my first line, I have Andrei Svechnikov, Nico Hischier, and Patrick Laine. My second line, I have Kayla Yamamoto, Elias Pettersson, and Alexis Lafreniere. My third line is Nick Suzuki, Jack Hughes, and Brady Tkachuk. Unfortunately, I couldn't bring Matthew Tkachuk because he's 22. Unlucky. And in my fourth line is Arthur Kaliev, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and Philip Hedl. On defense, I have Quinn Hughes and Cale Makar, Mikhail Sergachev, Miro Heiskanen, and Rasmus Dahlin, Victor Mete. And in net, I have Carter Hart and Spencer Knight with a third of Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. There's a lot of guys that I had to leave off this roster. It was very difficult to leave some of these guys off this roster. I wanted to bring Morgan Frost. I wanted to bring Nolan Patrick. I wanted to bring Capo Caco. But I think the thing is, it's difficult sometimes with, especially the young guys, to judge based on where they're at. So, like, when you debate either Capo Caco or Jack Hughes, really it came down to the fact that Jack Hughes can play center. And it was hard for me to really judge, like, stat for stat. Because, like, stats-wise, if I was going to bring a player, I'd probably go for Capo Caco. But is it really Jack Hughes' fault that he's playing on the New Jersey Devils, whereas, you know, Caco's been playing third or fourth line with the Rangers, so he's not getting a lot of ice time? That was a really difficult decision. Ultimately, I think it came down to, like I said, Jack Hughes being able to play center. Some other guys that I had to leave off. I left off Nolan Patrick just because I don't think he's gotten enough playing time in the recent years with his injuries to really be kind of up to speed to play an international tournament. I had to leave off Clayton Keller. That was difficult. Cole Caulfield got left off. I had to leave off Noah Dobson, Ville Heinola, and Henry Jokiharju on defense. So there's a lot of really, really good young players in the National Hockey League, but I think ultimately what I went for is a healthy mix of skating and a healthy mix of kind of bigger bodied players, and that's kind of where guys like Arthur Kaliev comes in, a guy like Brady Tkachuk comes in, guy like Victor Mete, although he's really not a great offensive player. I wanted somebody to actually be able to play the penalty kill, and I think Victor Mete and Quinn Hughes would be a really good top penalty killing unit. And in net, I mean, how could you really argue Carter Hart with what he's done recently? I mean, the guy is just basically, good. Yeah, just like he's basically one of the big reasons the Flyers really are where they are.
I mean, he almost cracked my Canada roster until I realized he was 20.
Yeah, and you know,
I picked him over guys like Braden Holtby.
I wanted to put in Yaroslav Askarov, but we decided to limit it to 18 to 21.
Oh, that's a good question, Rob. Who was it that I had on USA that you made me take off?
Quinn Hughes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I had Quinn Hughes.
Quinn Hughes. So my captain is Quinn Hughes. My two alternates are Andrei Svechnikov and Brady Tkachuk. I just feel like Quinn Hughes is the most mature, and he's the most sturdy and steady. Like, Cale Makar is obviously a really great player, but I feel like Quinn Hughes is a little bit better in his own end. And there's just something, like, really quiet about the way he plays this game. Like, he just goes out there and he just does his job. Svechnikov, I put a little bit of more of a, you know, a European flair, give the European guys some representation, because this is a very multicultural roster. And also Svechnikov's just, you know, very talented, high-flying offensive player. And I put Brady Tkachuk just because I like the way he leads by example. You know, obviously everyone knows he gets his nose dirty. He gets in his opponent's faces, and he's a very lead by example type player. So that's why I gave him one of my A's. So, what are your questions, comments? Why do I suck at building rosters? What do you guys got for me?
You want to go first, Steve?
No, you can go. I guess, alright. I'm surprised Philip Hedl made your roster. I mean, not very surprised, but I think it's interesting that he made the roster, considering this really isn't a guy that a lot of people are talking about. I'm also surprised. How old is Adam Fox?
I believe he's 22. I think I checked for him.
Yeah, Adam Fox isn't. I think he qualifies.
Adam Fox is 22. Yeah, I wanted to put him in. I wanted Tony DeAngelo, but they're both over 21.
So, and you left Adam Fox off your Team USA roster, Tim?
That's an interesting question. I just don't think he's been doing it long enough.
That's fair.
I don't think he's been performing at that level long enough, and we haven't seen him in a playoff position or under some pressure. So I just didn't feel comfortable putting him in a level like
That's
that.
fair. See, I didn't ask you why you didn't have him because I thought Rob had him because I thought he was 21, and then this changed everything.
He actually turned 22 in February, so he just barely missed our discussion.
Oh, okay.
So the reason I put Filipino in is obviously being an Islanders fan, I get to watch a lot of Rangers games. And one of the things, if you notice that I kind of went for this roster, is I went for a balance. So the issue we saw with Team North America in the World Cup was their defensive zone coverage was just horrendous. And I mean, that's to be expected from a young team. But when you have such high-flying defensemen as Kale Makar, Mikhail Sergachev, Miro Heiskanen, even though Heiskanen brings a little bit of size to the table, I feel like the defense needs some help from the forwards. And one of the things I've noticed about Filipino is he's not flashy, he's not fancy, but he does his job. He just goes out there and he does whatever you need him to do. He's a great utility player, and I think for a super young team like this, like an under 21 team would have, I think having those utility players is super helpful for power play, penalty kill, 4-on-4, whatever you need them to do.
That's fair.
And it's also why I included guys like Victor Mete instead of somebody like Bila Heinola, Noah Dobson, or Henry Jokiharju, because like I said, even though Victor Mete, he isn't exactly going to put the puck in the back of the net. I mean, just honestly, between guys like Lafreniere, Hischier, Laine, Kaliev, they should be more than enough scoring on this team. And you always like, I feel like the defensive side of international tournaments tends to get ignored a little bit, and that's why I put Victor Mete on there, because it really might come down to a big penalty kill in a tight moment, and you need somebody that's going to be able to go out there and kill off maybe a 5-on-3 or a double minor 4-minute power play. And I also just think Victor Mete is a great player, so I think he's like so criminally underrated based on the fact that he doesn't score a lot, and also that he's playing on a Montreal team who we talk about, Shea Weber all the time. So I really wanted to put Morgan Frost on, but I just don't think he's been playing long enough to really put him in. Clayton Keller was hard to leave off the roster, but again,
I was going to ask you about that one.
To be fair, Clayton Keller really hasn't lived up to the expectation, I feel like.
Yeah, well, I mean, everything that he does, I feel like other players on this roster do just better. Like, is he bringing anything to the table that Svechnikov isn't, or Hischier, or Laine isn't bringing to the table? And then, I mean, sure, you might make the argument you can try to put him in over maybe either Pierre-Luc Dubois or Filip Chytil or Arthur Kaliev, but I want Dubois and Chytil for their steadiness, and I put Kaliev in here just because, I mean, the guy's well over a goal a game in the OHL, and I know that stats in the OHL are inflated, but I feel like if you give him the right line mates, he's a prototypical power forward with a wicked one-timer, so he's a great option on the power play. If you put him out there with either Pettersson or Laine, you have to cover both boards for the one-timer option. It gives you kind of something to work with there, so that's why I ended up putting him in. Clayton Keller just kind of has been underperforming his draft placement, we'll say that.
Can I ask you? I have a question actually. Is it 21 at the beginning of the year, or
we said 21 just like today?
Well,
That's
okay.
why
Well, I meant
Laine
like, do you
from,
know how that works for like these tournaments? Like, for the IHF U21, is it 21 at the year mark, or?
I think
because
if you're
Adam Fox was turned 22 this year.
I'm not sure. So for the World Juniors, it's 18 and under, but I think if you're 18 at the start of the year, you qualify. So technically, yes, Adam Fox would have qualified for a 21 and under team based on those rules. I think just for simplicity's sake, we ended up just saying like today, because then it would have been like, well, who was 21 at the beginning of 2020 and blah 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 blah,
That's fair.
If you're asking me, would I put him on the team if he was eligible? I think he might displace Rasmus Dahlin only because, again, Dahlin has not underperformed his draft position, but I feel like Adam Fox does what Dahlin does. It's also difficult to say, right? Because Adam Fox, again, is playing on a very offensively potent New York Rangers team, while Dahlin has been playing on a somewhat anemic Buffalo Sabres team. So it's kind of hard to judge. I think he would definitely compete with Rasmus Dahlin. I think the rest of the team is pretty much a lock, but he would compete probably with Rasmus Dahlin for that 6th defenseman spot.
Interesting. I guess Dahlin also hasn't turned it, like, he hasn't grown into the dominant defenseman that we know he's gonna be. And he's still kind of figuring it out, so I could see why you would displace him with somebody else.
Yeah, he's still going into his body. I think that's the thing. He still kind of has like a bit of like a young Zdeno Chara issue going on, where like he's kind of big and lanky, but he doesn't know how to use it that effectively yet. You know.
Yeah, that's fair.
So do you guys have any other questions about that, or do you want to move on to the next team?
We can move on to the next team.
Is Ryan Lindgren 21 or 22?
He's the same age as Adam Fox, but I don't know if their birthdays are around the same time.
Ryan.
Did you even consider him, or?
Probably not. I feel like Ryan Lindgren. Again, I feel like he's a bit more tough in a sense that he's a bit more of like a body player. I mean, again, you guys have seen him more than I have. From what I've seen, I feel like he's a more of like a body position type player, like a hitter. He brings that offensive game too, but I like Adam Fox better than him, honestly. So if he was eligible, he'd probably end up in like the 7th to 8th defenseman spot. I think I would put Adam Fox over him.
That's fair. I think if Lindgren grows into a really good shutdown kind of guy that's a little more mobile than guys like Dan Girardi, but like in that Dan Girardi mold, I think he'll get consideration for Team USA when he's a little older. But I don't know if he makes it. But
yeah, I feel like my shutdown guy really came to me in Victor Mete. So I mean, this team is clearly going to be 3 scoring lines, and I have like Hedel, Dubois, Brady Tkachuk as really like my penalty killer type players, along with Victor Mete. So, you know, being the young guys, I think their biggest hope in this tournament is just go, go, go. You know, just try to skate as fast as you can. So we'll move on to the 3 teams that are left. We have Team Russia, Team Sweden, and Team Finland. So we started off with Steve and Team Canada. So we'll go to Steve for Team Finland.
So Finland, the philosophy honestly kind of came down to just the best available players, because for the most part, there's not as many obviously Finnish players in the NHL, but this tournament was open to anybody eligible, so Liga forwards are also available. But so I ended up going with, for forwards, I have Aho, Barkov, Rantanen, Granlund, Teravainen, Donskoy, Kasperi Kapanen, Capo Caco, which works because you didn't take him for your roster, so I actually get to have him. Rupe Hintz, Eric Halla, Joel Armia, and Miku Koivu. On defense, I have Esa Lindell, Rasmus Ristolainen, Sami Vatanen, Olli Mata, Henri Jokiharju, Sami Niku, and Vinny Heinola. And then I have Tuukka Rask and Pekka Rinne in net. So yeah, my philosophy here really was just the best available players, and I mean, there's a good mix of high-end talent here, right? I mean, there's Barkov, Aho, Rantanen, but it's a little more blue-collar than the Canadians. I mean, we can put it that way. So it's a little tougher, especially on defense. They're not exactly the most stalwart defensive team. They don't have, superstars up and down all through, through all 6 defensive slots on their roster. But I mean, I think they're pretty solid.
So, um, obviously, one of the things with Team Finland and um, just like the Finnish international teams in general have tended to be very reliant on goaltending, and they've typically had pretty good Finnish. I mean, we've seen a lot of really good Finnish goaltenders between, Mika Kiprasov, Kari Lehtinen for a while, obviously Tuukka Rask and Pekka Rinne. So who would be starting in Game 1?
I think Tuukka Rask. I think he's kind of just earned it.
And I'm assuming that's based on recent performance from Pekka Rinne being not so great.
Yeah, topped with the fact that Tuukka Rask played for a Stanley Cup last year, and has got his team in the President's Trophy race this year. I think it kind of seals the deal there.
So it's really interesting because there's a lot of really young Finnish defensemen actually. Esa Lindell, Ristolainen, Joki Harju, Niku, and Heinola. Do you think that's going to be a benefit or a hindrance to a team built in the way that Team Finland is built?
I think it might end up being to the benefit. They're probably going to be a little. They're probably going to be a little better of skaters than some of the older Finnish defensemen. So they're definitely be a lot more mobile. I don't know if they're going to be necessarily the most lockdown defense in this tournament, but that's why we have the goaltending that we have. It's almost by design that, like, because Finland has such strong goaltending, we can afford to ice a team with defense that's a little more questionable in its own end, but has the potential to really push play and drive play in the offensive zone.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair to say. I actually really like a lot of these Finnish defensemen. I love Esa Lindell. I think Ristolainen's great. Niku and Heinola are a good pair for the Winnipeg Jets up-and-coming defensemen. It's interesting because the Finns have a lot of really high-end talent here in Sebastian Aho, Barkov, and Rantanen, just to name the top 3, and then some I would kind of call sneaky talent in Teravainen, Hintz, and Kakko. Maybe not players that everyone thinks about, but guys that can certainly put the puck in the net. What do you think, like, the game plan for this roster would be? Would you push the pace? Would you kind of play a balance? What do you think would be your game plan if you were coaching this team?
I think you'd kind of have to push the pace because, like I said, their defense isn't the most stalwart, so you'd kind of want to have to keep the puck out of your end as often as possible. So you'd probably be looking to play the game in a similar way to the Toronto Maple Leafs are looking to play the game, which is very possession heavy, very like once the puck comes into your zone, you want it to turn it over as quick as possible and get it going back the other direction. You really don't want this team to be caught defending in their own zone for long stretches. So that's kind of my philosophy on how they'd have to play.
So I have a question.
Sure.
I see you took a lot of NHL players and you didn't take much of the 2019 championship roster from them. Was that on purpose? Did you just think that the players from the IIHF tournament couldn't compete against the NHLers?
No, the World Juniors kids you're talking about? Or are you talking about the World Junior, like the World Championship they play after the season?
After the season.
Well, there's a lot of NHLers on that roster too. There might not have been like some of these guys because they're still in the playoffs. But the thing is, when I started looking at the Liga and like the Finnish players playing outside of the NHL, it really wasn't it wasn't like a huge upgrade or like a surprise in sitting out there for me to pick over some of these younger guys too. So I just decided to take what essentially is known quantities over guys that I've never seen play before, and have very little like grasp of how good they actually are.
Yeah, I guess that's something we should note that obviously, guys, we live over here in North America, so we don't really get to watch international hockey all that much in terms of SM Liga, Finnish Elite League, KHL. So obviously, these teams would probably be bringing, especially Sweden, Finland, and Russia would probably be bringing some guys from the international teams, but we just don't know about them as much. But I also think, it might be fair to bring younger NHL players instead of older international players, especially if you're trying to push the pace, like you said. You're bringing that speed and that youth and that fleet of foot instead of an older guy from an international league.
That was my thinking about it anyway.
No, it's completely fair. I just was curious because I know that there are a couple good Finns from those IHF tournaments that I didn't see on.
I mean, it was also there's some legacy guys that aren't on this roster that might have been on this roster, 4, 5, 6 years ago.
That's
Guys
awesome.
like Valtteri Filppula and things like that. I mean, Mikko Koivu's still here, and Mikko Koivu's my captain, just because like he's kind of the captain of Finland, right? Like, there's the only other guy I could have given the captaincy to, I think, is Alexander Barkov. And I totally forgot he was on this roster for a second. So like, I originally gave my alternate to Mikael Granlund, but like that's a joke. It's actually going to Barkov, and then the other one's going to Mikko Rantanen. I didn't give any of the defensemen an alternate captaincy, and it's just because I feel like a lot of them are really inexperienced. So I'd rather give it to some forwards who have a little more both international and NHL experience.
So what you're saying is Solani's going to come back and he's going to come lead the team.
Yeah.
If I could coax Teemu Solani out of retirement, maybe.
The Finnish Flash.
And also, if I go back in time machine to 1994 and get Teemu Solani to come play for my team, sure.
Yeah, the Finnish Flash. I mean, I think that this is a pretty balanced team. A little bit maybe top heavy in goal scoring, but if Tuukka Rask gets hot, you really never know. I mean, he's just that good, right? Like, I think we've always known Finland for having excellent goaltenders, and like I said, you have a lot of top end scoring. Maybe not so much defense, so penalty killing and other special teams might be a bit of an issue, but I think if this team could push the pace and control the puck that we know the way the Finns like to do, I think they would have a shot. And we're going to get, obviously, into that at the end. But you have any last-minute questions on Team Finland, Tim?
No, that's pretty much it.
All right, so then we'll go over to their counterparts in Team Sweden, which was, of course, Tim's team to build. So, Tim, walk us through the crown jewels of Team Sweden.
I had a very hard time placing players in line positions on this team because there's a lot of great talent through the middle. But so I moved him over to I have Landeskog at left wing, start Backstrom at center, and Nylander at right wing. And my two starting defensemen are Hedman and Kleinberg.
That's William Nylander, not Alex Nylander, by the way.
Oh, yes, my mistake. Just to clarify that. My left wing on the second line is Andre Burakovsky. And I've got Zibanejad at center and Nyquist at right wing. And then Oliver Ekman-Larsson at defense and Erik Karlsson. My third line is Philip Forsberg at left wing, Elias Lindholm at center, and Jacob Silfverberg at right wing, with Eric Gustafsson and Alexander Edler on D. And my fourth line is Victor Olofsson, William Karlsson, and Ricard Raquel. And then I did the same thing for Team USA, so my two extra defensemen that I had were Anton Strawman and Matthias Ekholm. And my extra forwards were Mikael Backlund and Hornquist. My goalies are Robin Leonard, Jacob Markstrom, and Hank.
Hank the
Hank.
Tank. So, Raquel instead of Hornquist. I feel like they play very similar games. I feel like Hornquist might have more experience, but Raquel might have more speed. Is that what you were going for?
Pretty much it. Like this, Sweden has a young team, but a fast team. Young, skilled skaters, and it was really hard to not put Carl Hagelin on this list because of how good of a skater he is. But he just didn't crack it.
So, who's starting? Because that's a very interesting question, I feel, with the three guys that you have.
So it would honestly be a camp time decision. If Hank wants to show up and play Olympic hockey, he's obviously starting. He's a fucking gold medalist. But if Hank isn't going to show up at camp and he's not going to do it, it's got to be. I think it's Robin Leonard.
Yeah, I feel like
Markstrom has better numbers too, so let's not take away from him. His numbers are better, and he's played more games this season. But I like Robin Leonard a lot.
Well, I feel like it's harder to... If we're going based purely on recent performances, I think your best bet's either going to be Leonard or Markstrom. Obviously, the experience factor goes to Henrik Lundqvist, but...
If Hank wants to start the first game and get hot right off there, no one's going to score, so it doesn't matter. He can play the whole series. Like, he can play the whole Olympics, I don't care. But the second Hank gets cold, he's just going to freeze, and his old bones are going to crack.
Yeah, I mean, Leonard's been somewhat of a recent surge in the National Hockey League. You know, he got nominated for a Vezina Trophy last year. He's had a great season, all things considered, with how terribly that Chicago team defended. He had like a .915 save percentage, which is way more than you can ask from him on that team. And obviously, we've always known, again, the Finns and the Swedes both typically have very, very good goaltending. I said, obviously, that the strength of Team Finland is going to be speed and puck possession. Where do you think the primary strength of Team Sweden comes from?
Ability to skate and cycle. They all just... No one on this team is a pure goal scorer, honestly. If you look at all of their stats, most of them are pretty close on their goals and assists. I think that they're honestly going to have to just skate around and just play possession better.
I mean, yeah, it's pretty interesting. Like, you know, with all these other teams, you can really point to a guy and say, like, this is the guy that's going to score goals. But, I mean, Landeskog, Backstrom, Nylander, a power forward and two playmakers. Lindholm, Nyquist, Forsberg, again, mix of power play. I think really the only guy I can point to and say, like, that's a goal scorer might be Victor Olofsson. Obviously, the power play specialist, the one-timer for the Buffalo Sabres. But, I mean, other than that, like, obviously Zibanejad is scoring goals at a pretty remarkable pace this year. But I don't know if I would necessarily call him a like a pure goal scorer type player, you know?
That's really the issue. And I had Elias Pettersson on this roster before some scumbag stole him from me.
Yeah. Obviously, in a real international tournament, he'd be on the team, and he'd probably be the go-to guy for the one-time run of power play. Him and Olofsson would probably play power plays 1 and 2 for that one-timer option. How do you feel about...
Forsberg was probably going to kick off the team if Pettersson was playing.
How do you feel about the defense? Because it's got a weird mix of veterans and young players here.
I think the defense is honestly so solid through and through. All four pairings I have. I think that it's just, like I said, it's solid defenseman. I don't think you can say anyone on this team is going to be a leak wink or could even possibly have been cut. I think that you look at all these names and you're like, okay, those are 8 defensemen that I don't see anyone replacing.
Do you have any questions about this roster, Steve?
Just maybe did you consider someone like Lucas Raymond, who Rob didn't take for his under 21 team, but is draft eligible and has been honestly talked about as one of the best skaters in the draft recently? For a team that's built on like puck possession, do you ever think about maybe including somebody like Lucas Raymond, or does he not knock anybody off this list for you?
That's kind of it. It's really hard to knock someone off this list because, as I said, there were other people that I wanted to put also on this list. Like, I would have loved to have put Carl Soderberg. I think he's phenomenal. Even like someone like Jesper Fast, who's not maybe the greatest player right now, but I think he's a great skater. And he like picks his head up quite often. Louis
Jesper Foss
Eriksson-
would really bring a nice 200-foot element to your game, to like the team game, but it's kind of hard to justify bringing a guy like that to an international tournament.
when he's not putting up the numbers.
Yeah, when he doesn't score, because the tournament's so short that having guys like that isn't really useful, because you have to kind of score goals to get through.
Exactly. So it's hard to really, and someone like Louis Eriksson also, great veteran player, like great playmaker, but it kind of came down to I just needed to score, and I needed consistency. This team would win based off the fact that they're 4 lines deep, and like I said, that you're not really replacing. There's no one on this roster that you're like, oh, maybe there might have been someone better.
I totally forgot that Louis Eriksson existed. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, the only reason you kind of put a guy like Louis Eriksson on the team is like a legacy act, right? He gets one last like farewell tour on the international circuit, and then he retires. But it's not worth doing that for a team like this, which is competing.
In that same boat, you could also say that Nicholas Cronwall might have been able to do it.
I mean, even Henrik Zetterberg, if he didn't have the back problems.
And he might even be healthy enough to do this. I don't know. And those are 3 guys that it's hard to say whether they could have done it or not. And if they could have, and also the Sedin twins.
Well, the Sedin twins are done. I mean, you could have taken Joel Lundqvist, maybe, who's a guy that might have showed up on this list, just because he's highly accomplished in Swedish hockey, and the Sweden nominating committee values their contribution to Swedish ice hockey more than maybe they do some NHL players, just based on the fact that they want to have some representation of their home league, I guess. But I don't see how you could fit a guy like Joel Lundqvist onto this list, to be honest, anymore.
I just like as we said, I just don't know who you're kicking off this list for anything, really. Unless you're taking some goal scorer like Elias Pettersson, who obviously was under 21, so he didn't crack him. He didn't crack it, but someone like him could have came on this list. Someone, I don't know, like just goal scorers could have cracked this list, but
like if
there
Vladimir
weren't really.
Tarasenko all of a sudden became Swedish, that's the only way he's getting.
He renounces his citizenship.
Yeah, he's undoubtedly cracking the list.
So captains and alternate captains, who do you have?
My captain's Landeskog, I think.
It kind of has to be, right?
Yeah, I don't know who else on this team really takes the captain spot from him. Just because based off of skill and just experience being a captain. He's a young captain though. I don't know how, and I don't know how well of it he's doing at it.
He's gonna be the Rangers captain though, so we'll see.
Yeah. But the Colorado team for a few years.
I mean, there's something to be said for Landeskog being captain, because considering he's the youngest captain in NHL history, right? So
Yeah.
there's something there in terms of his ability
there's
to
something
lead
in the
teams.
locker room that we weren't seeing.
Yeah, I mean, he became captain at like 20 years old or something, or 18.
And my assistant captains are Backstrom and Hedman. They're both assistant captains on their respective teams, and just phenomenal players, honestly.
Just solid choices. You can't go wrong.
Backstrom's experienced veteran who's still putting up numbers the same way he did when he was younger.
Stanley Cup champion.
Exactly. And Hedman, probably, I would have given it to maybe Carlson if a few years back he could have gotten it, but he didn't get it this time. And Ekman Larson could have gotten it also, but Hedman is just better.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to argue with that, right?
Especially when the assistant captains isn't really a big deal. It doesn't really matter very much.
It's more of an honorary thing.
Exactly. So you could have given it to Larson. You could have given it to Carlson if you wanted to.
It's just that Victor Hedman does what Eric Carlson did, but better,
Pretty much.
and he's less of a liability.
Yeah, you're not wrong. Any last minute things on Team Sweden, or are we good on that?
I think we're pretty much good on that. I don't have any other questions.
Alright, so we'll move on to the last team here, which is Team Russia, which I had to build a roster for that team. So my first line, left wing Artemi Panarin, centered by Evgeny Malkin with Alex Ovechkin on the right side. Then I have Ilya Kovalchuk with Kuznetsov and Tarasenko. Obviously Kuznetsov in the middle there. I had to shift players' positions around, so I ended up going with Denis Guryanov on the left wing with Buchnevich in the middle and Alexander Radulov on the right side. And then I had Nikita Gusev, Artem Anisimov, and Yevgeny Dadonov. On defense, I have Ivan Provorov, and I don't know if he's even eligible for international tournaments anymore, but if he is, then I would put Slava Voinov up there. If he's not, you can kick him off the team. I don't really care that much as far as the international committee. I don't even know if he's eligible or not. I don't know what their ruling on that is. Then I had Dmitry Orlov with Yakov Rylov, who's a KHL player. This year he has 35 points in 60 games. And then I have Albert Urulin, again another KHL player, 31 points in 52 games with Nikita Zadorov. And in net, my three goalies... Okay, so I cheated a little bit because my starting goaltender would be Andrei Vasilevsky. I don't really know that there's much of a question for him. Bobrovsky would be on a roster, and then I really don't know how you can even pick between Ilya Sorokin or Igor Shesterkin for the third goalie, because Sorokin at this point has a less than, I think, 1 goals against average in the KHL with like 6 shutouts, and Shesterkin is what, like 9-2 in the National Hockey League?
Yeah, he's 9-2. Yeah.
So it's like, how do you even pick between those two? So I just lumped them in together. I let the coach figure that one out because I'm
That's
not
fair.
making that decision. That's way too hard of a decision for me to make. They're more or less like exactly the same. They don't play the same way, but I mean, again, for the longest time they were numbers 1 and 2 in the KHL. Any given year you could flip the two of them, right? So coach can figure that one out. And then some honorable mentions. I left off Vlad Nemestikov, Nikita Zaitsev, and Semyon Varlamov. My captain is obviously Alex Ovechkin, alternate Evgeny Malkin, and alternate Dmitry Orlov. I didn't really have much of a philosophy going in. I think the Russians, like, they just love to score goals. There's just something about Russians where they just love putting the puck in the back of the net. So I just tried to build a team around that where my centers would complement that. So obviously Malkin is used to being a goal scorer, but he can also pass the puck pretty well. Kuznetsov passes the puck pretty well. Buchnevich is a bit more of a speedy two-way forward kind of guy, and so is Anisimov. So I kind of just tried to keep the scoring to the wings and just let the centers distribute the puck and worry about the defensive zone. And then on defense, obviously you can't really argue Provorov is one of the best young defensemen in the NHL. And then Voinov and Orlov tend to be a bit more heavy-handed. Same with Zadorov, a bit more heavy-handed in the defensive zone. But again, you're really not gonna, like, let's be honest here. You're really not getting a lot of defense out of the Russian forwards. So I think I needed a bit more of a steady back end. And obviously, I mean, can you really even argue between Andrei Vasilevsky starting in net? I mean, he's one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. If this was 2 years ago, I might put Bobrovsky instead of Vasilevsky, but Bob's had a bit of a terrible year, so I ended up giving Vasi the start. And then, like I said, if the coach wants to figure out who to put in net between Sorokin and Shesterkin, he can do that. I'm not sure the ruling. Maybe Yaroslav Askarov would be eligible for this tournament, but for our purposes, we just kept him out because he's 17 at the moment. So that was my kind of logic in building this team.
So, did you consider putting Zaitsev in for maybe one of these 2 KHL defensemen?
I honestly considered putting Zaitsev in instead of Nikita Zadorov because Zadorov is a bottom six, heavy, hard checking type defenseman for the Colorado Avalanche. And I think Zaitsev brings a bit more of a two-way game instead of just pure body contact. The thing about Zaitsev, the reason I kept him out is because all three of these guys have more experience than him. And like I said, I know it's a stereotype, obviously, that Russians don't like to play defense, but I mean, none of these Russian forwards are really ever going to win you a Selke trophy. Oh, wait. I screwed up my lineup here. Instead of, I can't believe I forgot. Instead of Anisimov on the fourth line, I'd probably shift some people around, but Nikita Kucherov obviously has to be on this roster, so I think I would kick Anisimov off for Nikita Kucherov to be on this roster. Obviously.
Yeah, I mean, Nikita Kucherov is kind of one of the best in the league.
Yeah, I was reading an old roster that I did before I made that change. But obviously, Kuch would be on this team. But yeah, like I said, you're not really getting any Selke winners out of this group. So I ended up going with a steadier, more veteran blue line to try to at least mitigate some of that, Any more questions on that for either one of you guys?
No, I'm just curious about the KHL defenseman, so that's all.
What was your first line?
I would have to change the lines because this is an old lineup, but it was Panarin, Malkin, and Ovechkin. I think my second line would end up being Kucherov.
Do you think that
with
those
Kuznetsov and Tarasenko?
Do you really think that those three are the matching three that you'd want, though?
I feel like yes, because so Ovechkin is the goal scorer, right? He's the one-timer option. He's always going to be there. The thing I've noticed about Panarin, getting to watch him more now, is he's so good at puck possession. He's really, really good at just holding onto the puck and creating that open space for his players. So I feel like him with Ovechkin would be a dream pairing almost, because he draws the attention to him. He's almost like a magnet. When he gets the puck, people pay attention. And he's very good at that. So I feel like he's a perfect match with Ovechkin. And then Malkin is kind of a weird anomaly type player because he can really be almost whatever you want him to be. Like, he's proven throughout the years that, like, when Crosby's not playing, he turns into that top line center who can do it all. When Crosby is playing, he can be a goal scorer. When you put him with a guy like Phil Kessel, he can distribute the puck.
You don't think, though, that maybe you should have put Panarin with some lesser named players, being that he's such a playmaker? Because Ovechkin's going to find the net pretty much no matter what you do. And like you said, Malkin's going to just be a great center because he's going to step up. That's what he does. So you don't think that maybe you should have put someone else at that wing? I also think that Panarin's very strong on the rush. I think because like you said, he draws two people to him, and it then becomes a one-on-one on a rush with the other forward and the defenseman or whoever is back there. So maybe that could have been a strong point for them, was their breakout.
I feel like you can make the argument that you would probably try to put Panarin with maybe a guy like Kucherov, somebody who's a little bit faster, more fleet of foot.
Even, honestly, I might even say Kovalchuk, just because Kovalchuk's going to kind of goal hang. And that's what you need. I feel like Ovechkin is older age, and Malkin have both gotten a little more defensive and less sitting at the blue line waiting.
I feel like if you're going to split up Panarin from Malkin and Ovechkin with the premise of getting things done on the rush, you're not going to put him with Kovalchuk because he's not really the fastest skater anymore. You might put him with Kucherov and Denis Gurianov because they can both fly.
Or even Buk.
Or Buchnevich because Buchnevich can skate really well. I think with Panarin, though, like, you're just trying to get him as much ice time as possible. I mean, the guy just does magic when he's on the ice. And granted, there's not much of a difference between first and second line ice time. You could always give him, like, all 2 minutes to the power play, but
I was gonna say, I think you might be able to just roll with it based off like what Chicago's done with Patrick Kane being on the second line.
Um, yeah, it's kind of tough. Like, I can understand your argument. Yeah, I might put him with a guy like Kucherov just for the speed, but I think once these three get in his zone, if they establish his own presence, there's not a lot you can really do to stop him. I feel like that's almost a guaranteed goal. I don't know. I feel like just having gotten to watch Panarin this year, you just want him to be on the ice as much as possible. So maybe you switch Ovechkin to the second line and put Kucherov up there and just give Ovechkin all 2 minutes of the first power play line.
I don't know if you could. How do you tell Ovi, oh, you're on the second line?
Right.
Now?
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like,
I don't think. I think that Panarin, despite the fact that he's a phenomenal player, I think that he would almost understand that he's going to the second line because he's the guy on that line. Like, he's not. I don't say he's the team, but if like you said, I think if you put him with Kuz and even Tarasenko.
yeah, I think the biggest issue with Team Russia is they're really not the strongest down the middle. I mean, the four centers that I have right now is Malkin, Kuznetsov, Buchnevich, and Gusev. And really, I love Kuznetsov. He's a great player, but I don't know. I feel like after Malkin and Kuznetsov, that's a significant drop off in talent. No offense to Buchnevich or Gusev, but they're just not
You're
on
right.
the level of Malkin and Kuznetsov. So I think that's the primary weakness of this team. Really, is that down the middle they're really not the greatest. They're very strong on the wings, but their centers are not exactly high pedigree once you start getting past the second line center. So yeah, it's weird. You've got a really weird mix of players here. A lot of goal scorers, not really a lot of speed, all things considered. Like, Radulov's kind of slow. Kovalchuk's not really that fast. Gusev's not the fastest. Dadonov is kind of mid-tier in terms of speed. Ovi and Malkin really aren't super fast, but then you got guys like Panarin, Kucherov, Tarasenko, and Guryanov who can, like, fly up and down the ice.
I think that their breakout would be the most dangerous point, and not because of their speed, but because I think that you'd have to worry about them scoring on the breakout. Like, they're just because the issue is they're just going to go in and shoot.
Yeah,
They're going to wind up probably playing a traps type style. And because on the back end, they've got a lot of young guys or younger guys. So I think that on that back end, they'd wind up just playing a trap and just hoping for the best.
Yeah, I mean, these guys, like, they're also just big. Like, this is a big team. Like, Malkin, Ovechkin, Guryanov, Radulov, even, like, Kucherov. Like, these guys are big. Like, Ivan Provorov's a big defenseman. Zadorov's a big guy, so it's kind of a weird mishmash almost, where it's like you got a lot of goal scorers, but they're also big, but they're not really the fastest, but then some of the guys are the fastest. I almost put like Datsuk back in the lineup because he's still playing in the KHL, so he's still eligible, but I feel like he just doesn't fit the mold of this team anymore. Like, he's not the Magic Man anymore, you know? Like, he's not the Datsuk of old, so that's why I ended up keeping him off.
I would say his issue would be that he's just not big enough to do those physical things that he used to do.
Yeah, I feel like the way this team's going to score goals is, like, just outplaying people in the corners and then just firing pucks at the net, because almost everyone on this roster can shoot, and shoot really well. Like,
that's kind of what I'm saying. I think that people like Ovechkin's just gonna come down. He's just gonna rip it. I think that you're just gonna have to just start shooting from top of the circles.
Yeah,
and out.
Yeah, for sure. It's a weird roster for sure. Like I said, that's ended up a part of the reason why I went with the heavier defenseman is just because the centers aren't really going to be much of a help defensively. The wingers are definitely not going to be much of a help defensively, and it's just you're really going to have to rely on Andrei Vasilevsky to stand on his head, which he can do. He's obviously a Vezina type, a Vezina caliber goaltender, and then if he starts to have issues, obviously you can go to Sergei Bobrovsky, 2-time Vezina Trophy winner Sergei Bobrovsky. And in worst possible case scenario, you end up with either the best defenseman in KHL, Ilya Sorokin, or a 9-2 Igor Shesterkin. So, like, the goaltending is really not going to be the issue on this team, but potentially a lack of defense from your forward core is going to hurt, and it might hurt, like, real bad. So it's weird. It's quite a mishmatch roster. So we can.
I had that issue with Team USA though, with Patrick Kane, Jack Eichel, and who did I have as my center?
Pavelski.
Pavelski, yeah. Because I had the issue where I wasn't. Where Patrick Kane and Jack Eichel, I wasn't sure how they would work together, honestly.
Well, I mean,
I think that's.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's just hard because, honestly, Jack Eichel is a Marian Hossa type player, I would like to say. So I put him there with the hopes that he was gonna, because Jack Eichel has a stupid number of assists just as he does goals. Jack Eichel's stardom though comes with his breakaways and his just disgusting one, like him versus the goalie, just straight up and scoring every time.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was the issue for Team USA when they built that roster that we were talking about earlier, the Beat Canada roster, where you had a weird mix of guys like David Backes and like Brendan Dubinsky was on that roster, but then on the top you had guys like Phil Kessel and Patrick Kane. It was like this really weird like conglomerate, like, and they built basically what is an NHL roster, right? Like that's an ideal NHL roster is your top two lines score, your third line's a mix, and then your fourth line's are grinders. But international hockey is completely different. It's basically like who can score the most goals, and that's not saying you can't win with good defense. Like Team USA in the John Gibson.
It almost turns into the 3-on-3 overtime hockey in the NHL, kind of, where it's about passing, possession, and speed. And you don't, because you have a bigger ice, you have more time to make plays, and every mistake you made is amplified by 10 because of the size of the rink.
Yeah, I mean, well, that was the thing with you know, you can win defensive hockey. Like when Team USA won the World Juniors, I think it was like 2012 with John Gibson, Seth Jones, Johnny Gaudreau, like that team. That was a defensive team. Like they won a lot of games like 2-1, 3-2. But because there's just so much talent and there's so much open ice, it's really hard to try and say we're going to win with defense. Like obviously it happens, but more often than not, I mean, Team Canada's 4 lines of all-stars basically. So it's really hard to kind of fathom, but it's really hard to make that adjustment and say, well, yeah, this team can win defensively. Because can it happen? Yes, but more often than not, the teams we see winning are the offensive teams. So it's difficult. And I mean, really, you know, what we're gonna shift into the last kind of phase here. Where we talk about like personal rankings, like what team do we think would win. I mean, I don't know. I feel like it's really hard to argue against Team Canada. Like obviously it's always hard to argue against Team Canada. But I feel like Team USA might have a chance just because if we abandon that old way of thinking, like we're gonna beat Canada, and instead of saying beat Canada, it's just put the best team on the ice. I mean, especially with guys like Ben Bishop and Connor Hellebuck, I mean, 2 Vezina Trophy caliber goaltenders, and Team Canada featuring Carey Price and Braden Holtby, both of who have struggled this year. I mean, obviously they could hit this tournament and catch fire, but I think for the first time in quite a while, you can honestly make a strong argument that Team USA is better off in net than Team Canada is. Am I crazy?
It's going to
for
come
saying
down
that?
to, I think the whole tournament's going to come down to what goalie would get hot. And that might be silly to say because it's like, oh, obviously a hot goalie's going to do it, blah, blah, blah. But like, it's because of the talent that you have and the names, there's none of these goalies are particularly doing well in this season. None of the big name ones, I would say. outside of like Tuukka Rask, but even then, like he's not playing that. Like his numbers aren't that great. Tuukka Rask is winning off the fact that the Bruins are just outscoring everyone.
I think honestly, like the best goaltender in this tournament might honestly, out of all these goalies, obviously you can make the argument that it's Andrei Vasilevsky. You can argue Tuukka Rask, but I think in terms of like just strength in goaltending, I really think Team USA might have the best goaltenders in this tournament. I mean, Connor Hellebuck is putting up
Great numbers.
a Vezina type season behind a defense that, let's be honest here, in the Winnipeg Jets really isn't great. It's very young. It's very leaky at times. And Ben Bishop's...
You made me ink.
What? What?
You made me ink.
Yeah, exactly. Is that Finding Nemo?
Yeah, that's what he says when they score. When the
Yeah.
people score against him, he goes up to the team. You guys made me ink.
You heard it here first. Connor Hellebuck is an octopus, and he also starred in Finding Nemo. He might have been like, when did that movie come out? It was so long ago.
Is he born yet?
He was definitely born.
Yeah, he was. I'm just kidding.
But yeah, I think that in terms of goaltending, I think Team USA is the best goalies in this tournament, and then it really is going to come down to, can you stop all of Crosby, McDavid, McKinnon, Tavares, Bergeron, Taves, Sagan, Marner, like all these guys? Can you put a stop to that team? Because I think defensively, like, you can really argue either team. I'm not going to say either team is necessarily better, but Team USA's defense is pretty good. I mean, you've got Jacob Slavin, who's considered a Norris Trophy candidate. You've got Seth Jones and Zach Werenski, if Werenski cracks the lineup, two of the best young defensemen in the NHL, who you can honestly play them together since they know each other, so the chemistry's there. You've got John Carlson, obviously a Norris Trophy candidate this year, probably the winner this year, I would argue. And then take your pick of Ryan McDonough, Charlie McAvoy, Jeff Petrie, Tony DeAngelo, Adam Fox maybe. I think Team USA's defense is pretty good. And combined with their goaltending, that honestly might be their ticket, ultimately, if it came down to USA Canada. I don't think there's a question that Canada's forwards are more talented, but am I crazy for saying that I think the defense might honestly be in Team USA's favor between two Norris Trophy candidates and then some of their other players?
I think that USA's defense is just big and fat. I think that they're not the best skaters per se, but they're smart, they're quick, and they're good at decision making. And like I said, at this caliber, you can't be Brett Burnings on defense, tossing it up the middle, hoping that they don't like somehow skate over it and intercept it, because that's going to be the goal. In these international games, the games are always 2-1, 1-0, or they're like 7-6.
Yeah, that's a good point. Steve, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So we were just we finished up Team Russia and we were just debating. I said, am I crazy for saying that I think A, Team USA has the best goaltenders in this tournament, and B, that Team USA's defense honestly might be better than Team Canada's?
It honestly might be. The goaltending, they might have the edge, just in the fact they're bringing Hellebuck and Bishop. Jonathan Quick's a little past his prime, but he's still Jonathan Quick. I mean, the defense is definitely going to be a strength of theirs.
I said the goaltending because Price and Holtby have had off years this year. Specifically, like this year, obviously. Their pedigree is phenomenal, but I said Price and Holtby are having off years this year. And then when it comes to the defense, you have two Norris Trophy candidates between John Carlson and Jacob Slavin. Seth Jones and Werenski can play together. They have that chemistry. And then, oh no, my fourth and, or my other defensemen are only, Ryan McDonough, Charlie McAvoy, Tony DeAngelo, or Jeff Petrie, like...
Yeah.
I think, again, there's not really an argument against Team Canada's skill up front. They're clearly the most talented forwards in the tournament. But I think Team USA has an edge in net, and they're either equal or maybe even better than Team Canada defensively in terms of both their defensive cores, talent, and then their ability defensively.
That's very fair. I think the USA has a real shot at a gold medal. These tournaments started today.
So are we all in agreement that the two front runners would end up being Canada and Team USA? Does anybody want to make an argument for another team out of these 5 for a gold medal?
I think that Sweden could make a gold medal run, to be honest, with Elias Pettersson.
Yeah.
That's a big part.
Well, I really like the Swedish defenseman, and I don't think that you can really argue against either one of Robin Lehner or Jacob Markstrom.
The great part about Sweden is they're all like 25, 26, 24. So they're still young and younger than, but they have experience under their belt still. They're not like Capo Caco, who you mentioned for Russia, who is still young and hasn't done much in his career yet and hasn't faced those tough situations.
Yeah, I think the only issue with Team Sweden is, like you said, that if they had Elias Pettersson, obviously they'd have a real legitimate bona fide goal scorer. I just don't know that they would have enough of a legitimate, like, crunch time goal scoring. You know, obviously Team Canada, point to whoever you want. If you're asking for a goal late in the game, you can either pass it to McKinnon, pass it to Sagan, pass it to Stamkos or Point.
McDavid could just skate down the whole rink himself and do it if he wanted.
Yeah. I think with Sweden, if you put Pettersson on that team, in a crunch time situation, you're either asking Landeskog, Olofsson, or Pettersson, which isn't bad. Or maybe Zibanejad, which isn't bad, but is it really on the same level as even Eichel, Kane, again, Jake Gensel, on pace for 40 goals before he broke his neck this year. I don't know that Sweden has enough goal scoring to get it done, but Sweden's strength also comes from its system, and we've seen that through past international tournaments, that they're always so well coached. So that's another X factor you have to take into consideration. I can see you making an argument for them. I would consider them a bubble gold medal contender. But if you were to disagree and say that they're a legitimate gold medal contender, I don't know that I would have that much of an argument against that.
Well, the issue is usually USA and Canada end up in the same bracket, and then Sweden ends up in the other bracket.
Yeah, the groups always kind of put USA and Canada together. They're always
which is just stupid, honestly, because I want a USA-Canada gold medal game, not a bronze medal game. Or not a quarterfinal game or whatever.
Right, yeah. Steve, how do you feel about Team Sweden? Bubble gold medal or legitimate gold medal contenders?
I think they're a bubble gold medal. I don't know if I'd put them at legitimate, just because like it's all the issues we keep talking about. The goal scoring is the biggest one. Like they don't have a consistent enough goal scorer in their lineup.
And then how do we feel about the other 3? Finland, Russia, and Team World Under 21. Are we saying bronze medal contenders, gold medal contenders? Where do you guys put these teams?
I think Finland could make us. I think Finland and Sweden or Russia could make silver medal and maybe bronze. But it would depend on the grouping. That's really what it would come down to.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think Finland and Russia can make silver medal runs. I mean, if Russia's goaltending gets hot enough, they could get into a gold medal game. But I think they cap out realistically like a silver medal.
Yeah, I don't. I was talking with Tim about this while Discord was going nuclear. I don't like the Russian centers beyond Malkin and Kuznetsov. It kind of really falls off a cliff after that. So I don't really know that they defend well enough, especially because I'm sure you've got Provorov and Orlov, but you're not really bringing super high caliber defensemen to the table. So it really would rely on Vasilevsky. I would honestly probably say, if we had to do power rankings, I think it's super hard to pick between Canada and Team USA. Obviously, I would want to see Team USA win the gold medal. And I think you can make a legitimate argument that they would based on the defense and goaltending. I just think in terms of pedigree, the power rankings really, I would say Canada 1, USA 2, although you could really say 1A, 1B for those guys. But for simplicity's sake, I'll say my power rankings would be Canada 1, USA 2, probably Sweden 3, Russia 4. I'm going to say Finland 5 and World Under 21 6. It's really just hard with the U21s because there's such a big question mark. They can go either way. They can either be phenomenal and outskate and outscore everyone, or they could be like Team North America, who just looked like they were just out to lunch, and just...
The interesting part about U21 is that they all have been playing IIHF the years before, like very recently. So I don't know if that gives them an advantage or a step ahead. I don't know how that would exactly factor into it.
I could easily see Team World Under 21 either being placed 4th over ahead of Russia and Finland, or they could be as low as 6. There's such a big question mark with them, and I mean that just comes with youth, obviously.
I don't see them meddling, but I think that they could easily get 4th. I think 4th is super plausible for them.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. So what did I had Canada, USA, Sweden, Russia, Finland, 21. What about you, Tim?
I have probably, I'd say probably Canada, USA, Sweden, Russia, U21, Finland.
What about you, Steve?
Probably something similar. Canada number 1, USA number 2, Sweden's number 3. Russia's probably 4. The under 21 team's probably 5, and Finland's probably number 6 for me.
Yeah, I think honestly, like I said, it's such a hard call between USA and Canada, but I think in terms of just history and pedigree of forwards, I'm going to go with Team Canada number 1. But would it surprise me if Team USA won a gold medal with this particular roster? Not at all. I think it's entirely plausible because that defense is stacked, and they have, between Hellebuck and Bishop, 2 Vezina caliber goaltenders, plus Quick, who multi-time Stanley Cup champion.
The clutch king.
Yeah, Vezina trophy winner, Conn Smythe trophy winner. Hard to argue that. Any last minute comments on our international teams here?
I think that's kind of it, right?
Yeah, I don't really have much more to say.
So hopefully next year we will get to see some Olympic hockey. Who knows if the USA or if the NHL is going at this point. All signs point towards no as being the most likely answer for whether or not NHL players go. And I personally don't really see that changing. But if NHL players end up going, it could make for a great tournament. And even if it doesn't, Olympic hockey is always fun to watch. And then if they don't get to go, then you get to see probably some young guys. You'll probably get to end up seeing more juniors and OHL guys if they end up getting to go. So thank you guys for watching. I'm not really entirely sure when or what the next episode will be. We were talking about maybe doing some redrafts, going back and looking back at old drafts and making our own top 10 picks for those drafts, which could be fun. So maybe we'll do that. But either way, thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you guys again next time.